What's up, guys? Thank you first for coming here because everybody traveled, and man, I'm excited because I've been thinking about this podcast for a couple months now. And with the year that we've had, it's been an insane year, and COVID, like it hasn't come together. So the fact that you guys traveled here, took your time out of your day, if you're listening, guys, I'm telling you, you're in for a treat because I have some very successful people here with me, my friends, and they're some of the smartest, brilliant minds in the industry that I know of. So let me do some quick intros and then we'll get right into it. So on my left, Patrick Palmer. He is an EVP at CrossCountry, built and sold Alpine. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mortgage. Patrick's uber smart. I met him a few years ago, and anytime I can get Patrick on the phone, it's a treat. And I learned something from you every time we speak. So thanks for being here, man. Savage, been on the show many times, needs no intro. Owns a tech company, a small one called Mortgage Coach that I think everybody in the industry uses. Very, very successful. I love talking to Savage. As you all know, he's been on the show many times because he's got one of the most well-rounded opinions, kind of like my coach, Bill Hart. You speak with so many different people, so many different high-level executives and producers, and it just rounds out your opinions and your thoughts. So having you travel up from Oregon's huge for us. So thanks for being here.
It's good to be here and wouldn't miss it.
Oh man, powerhouse. I'm so excited. And then Tony Blodgett, SVP at New American Funding. And then you also were VP at Network Funding. Is that correct?
No, I was the president and COO
Yes.
at Mortgage Advisory Group, but before that, I worked at Network.
Yes. So uber talented guys. And I again, thank you so much for being here. It's a treat for me, and I know everybody listening. Guys, this is going to be long form. So if you're watching on video, you might want to put your headphones on. You might want to take a long drive because there's going to be a ton of information. And so last week I talked about something that actually Dave disagreed with and I loved, and this is kind of why it kind of came together, and I love that my friends can call me out on this stuff and just go, hey man, did you think of it this way? So we talked about false sense of accomplishment. I kind of want to know your guys' thoughts on that phrase, especially in the context of 2020. And then we'll move from there. But Dave, you text me, and I think it was the same day. You're like, hey, I don't think it's necessarily false sense of accomplishment. I think it's more of unsustainable. What'd you call it? Unsustainable.
Well, first of all, I think everybody needs to pat themselves on the back. They worked hard. They worked smart. The industry evolved. We overnight had to live differently, meet with clients differently. Right. So the industry had a massive accomplishment. It's not a sustainable accomplishment. So it's not, I just like that false sense. No, let's cherish the rewards. We worked hard. We accomplished a lot, but it's not sustainable. At least not in the way that you're currently constructed. You're seeing a lot of big teams say, well, I want to have the same goal, but I got to add people. So I just think it's about sustainability.
Yeah. I was worried when I said that phrase. It's definitely provocative, right? Like I was worried people were going to take that wrong. And I tried to say that many times, like, hey, I'm not trying to take away from your accomplishment, but there were several factors that happened this year. And some people, like in our master's coaches group, were texting me like, dude, so right on. So that was why I know I hit a nerve. It was like, I don't know if I agree. I don't know if I disagree. So what were you guys, when you watch that, or if you think about that, what are your thoughts? I'll start with Patrick on just false sense of accomplishment for 2020. And I think you watched it, right? Like, did you kind of understand the premise that I was talking about when I presented it?
I did. I think I had a split idea of what you were talking about. In my mind, the false sense of accomplishment probably came from if you thought you could drive that many leads or prospect that well in a normalized market and didn't give credit to precipitous drop in interest rates and the amount of that side of the transactions going on as part of your success, then you're probably over celebrating and being a little bit irrational. I think the flip side of that is the achievement comes from operational greatness. So if you had an amazing database and you had leads coming in from past clients and you were able to execute and go 2, 3, or even 4x in growth from the prior year, that's well worth celebrating from an achievement standpoint, but not necessarily that, it was all because of you for driving the lead in the door.
Right. The idea of the show actually came from you and I, Tony and I, talking on the phone the week before. And I was saying, man, I have this sense that, and I was speaking at an LO level and then organizationally, I think all of our companies have had amazing years. And I think that they're confused if they think they can do that again next year with the same amount of effort. I think it's going to be tougher. And then the example I gave you, and you kind of laughed, is like, that loan officer, we'll say a loan officer, that has a flyer, and they take it into like the realtor's office, and they're so nervous just to go make that call, and they have this flyer, and they're like in the drive, out in the parking lot going, oh my God, I can't do this. They overcome that initial fear of making the call, but they run in there and they drop the flyer off, and then they leave. And I was like, Tony, the goal wasn't to drop the flyer off. The goal was to actually make a relationship with somebody. And so that was one of many instances that I gave you, like, that's a false sense of accomplishment. Like, you weren't supposed to drop the flyer off. You're supposed to go, hey, Tony, I'm Ryan. I work for blah, 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 and then develop a relationship. But that is one of the most practical examples I can give. And we were cracking up, and I think you agreed with at least that one.
Yeah, no, I think that when you're taught to make a sales call, I think what people leave out is you got to make an effective sales call.
Right.
So yeah, it's like, I made the sales call, check it off the list. That's not enough. I got to say, I do agree with Patrick that I think when I like the way that you phrase the false sense of accomplishment, because it made people go, well, wait a second. People get a little defensive. And when people do that, then they have to kind of defend themselves. And I think there's a lot that we can be proud of with 2020 and what I've seen people on my team and people all around the industry. And what I saw people do was capitalize on the opportunity that was put in front of them. But you can't disagree that there was market conditions that we have to give some credit to that none of us saw coming, especially those people who had really high, refinance percentages. Sometimes they get beat up on a lot because you're like, well, hey, what's your purchase percentage? And the reality is there's many of us, and I was one of them as a loan officer, and many today that work very hard to develop deep relationships with their clients. This client for life idea that we all talk about, well, this is a market where you need to capitalize on that. Yeah. So if you did a great job of maintaining your database, using tools like Mortgage Coach to communicate to them, you're their trusted advisor, well, then of course you're going to be super busy with refinances when rates drop like this. And so I don't think we should take that away from people. That means you did a great job. You're not a churn and burn kind of a loan officer. And this is a year where you get to kind of reap those, reap what you sowed, if you will. And so from that standpoint, I think that everyone deserves a lot of credit who took advantage of the opportunity. But you're right. I mean, doing what we're doing right now, or doing what we did over the last 9 months, next year is probably not going to bear the same fruits, if you will. So,
well, and we talked about organizationally too, like so many companies have ramped up. I'm curious what you guys think about this. They've ramped up to support this insane volume, and to think that to your point, like leads are going to continue to come in at that pace that easy with rates being that low. Like I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges moving into 2021 is you've ramped up, you've hired so many operations to support this insane amount of volume. I mean, what's the collective for the 3 trillion or something? Yeah. An insane amount of business. I'm hopeful that there isn't a lot of retraction and layoffs next year. Have you guys thought about that? Are you talking about it through your companies at all?
Well, I mean, I'll go first on this one. Look, this isn't any of our first cycle through, we've never seen a market quite like this, but we've definitely seen refi booms over the last decade. We've seen multiple of them. And so, myself, I can speak to kind of how we hired in our region. We were kind of slow to hire. We really worked hard. Not that we didn't want to either. It's been difficult to find talented people.
Oh, for sure.
But I don't feel like we overstaffed in this market. I think that, we worked really hard to come up with creative solutions to incentivize our existing team to increase production and productivity, which they certainly did. I think everyone was surprised to realize that when people started working from home, they actually got more productive. Most of our ops people did. At least that's what we experienced. And so the capacity went up with the people we had, and people got used to kind of that new normal. We have added some support staff, but not enough that I don't think that we can handle if the market slows down. One other thing I think is important to recognize with our sales teams, and this is something I've really tried to instill in the people I've talked to, whether they work for me or someone else, is this is a market where your production will increase substantially, in some cases 2, 3, 4 times what you're used to doing. But what that also does is it gets you as a loan officer and as a loan officer team used to handling more production. And what you can do is you can put processes in place. And I think people have, whether they realize it or not, people have got used to working at a much higher level. Yeah. And it's going to open up capacity for you to increase your business forevermore. I mean, there's times when people level up in their business. And I think this is one of them for many people that are long-term committed loan officers or realtors or anyone who's capitalized on this market. And so from that standpoint, you can expect the people who maybe they're doing double what they've ever done or quadruple. Doesn't mean they'll keep doing that, but they'll definitely be doing 25%, 30% more than they ever have if they take that new processes, those new systems they've developed by having so much loans coming through their pipeline, and they divert just some of that attention towards the things that we all know they need to do, which is prospect and make new relationships with more realtors and referral sources and whatnot. So
that makes me think about, and we'll get into this in a second, but one of the biggest takeaways for me, and there's so much to learn from this year, personally, professionally, organizationally, necessity is the mother of invention, and out of necessity, we all had to become way more efficient. I mean, that is going to be such a lesson moving forward over the next 5-10 years. And you're right. We learned that as a team, individual teams had to be way more efficient because they're doing 2-3 times the volume. Regions had to become more efficient. Entire companies had to become more efficient. So, I mean, 2020 has definitely been tough. But for me, that's one of the biggest takeaways is out of necessity. Like efficiency had to go through the roof. But you guys all run very successful companies. Not everybody staffed properly.
Sure.
So that's why I talk to me about that. Like, I'm guessing for every company that did staff properly, there might have been a company that maybe will struggle with, being overstaffed. I mean, I'm sure you guys are very smart, and so I'm sure your company didn't do this, but you did hire 184 underwriters, which kudos to you. Apparently, that's where all the underwriters went in the industry. They're all with Patrick. But what was that time frame that you hired? Just like over the last quarter or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think they started the hiring process probably sometime around July when the volumes and the turn times were stretched so hard and it becomes difficult to manage anything, right? And there's a couple different ways to look at this. It's like, that sounds like a lot, but when you go from 16 billion to 30 billion, we did 30 billion in the first 10 months. It's kind of what it requires just to make sure that it doesn't take 90 days to refinance a loan for somebody, which causes all sorts of other costs, as you guys are aware.
Yep.
I think the other thing that Tony's right is that if we really stopped and looked at doing more with less in terms of doing more volume with fewer people, nothing is better for that than forced adoption. I try to get my folks to be on Microsoft Teams, to use day one certainty on every single deal, to use digital mortgage, to use mortgage coach, to use video. This scenario was the perfect storm to get people who were working at home, who had no way to communicate with real estate agents, no way to communicate with executives, because you couldn't fly to get in a room in Cleveland, Ohio, or wherever you guys are headquartered, right? So you're forced to use these tools, you're forced to adopt, and the efficiencies, you never know if you never fully adopt them. But we were able to get high levels of adoption rather than we want somebody to adopt this, we're going to invest in this tech, but then nobody really gets in and learns. This was forced adoption, and I think Tony's right. We created the ability to fund a lot more loans with fewer people.
Yeah.
The second belief is this, and I think this comes from my days of being a CEO, and it's if you build capacity and you've done it once, sure, maybe you don't hit that same number again. But now I have to believe that my ability to go out and recruit in a normal market and get the most talented people, which we do in the mortgage industry all the time. We're recycling the top originators in this industry all the time. It's kind of a sad thing, but it's how it works.
Right.
If you don't have the capacity to grow into that, if you're running your manufacturing line at 125% capacity all the time, you don't have room to grow the top line, which is what's critical to long-term sustainability, as Dave pointed out earlier.
I think that's another benefit. I'll throw to you in a second, Dave, but you just reminding me that this year, and our industry sucks at bringing in new blood. You're right. Like we just kind of cycle through the same talent, but out of necessity, we've had to hire new ops people. We were talking about in the green room, like new LOs and kind of train them to be a junior LO and then maybe a loan officer assistant and then an actual loan officer by themselves. So I think this year, because we had to, we finally brought some new blood into the business, which will be good to have some. I think the average age is still pretty high, but maybe we'll start a movement, for next year moving forward. I know I hired a ton of new blood and it's been great. They're very excited to be there. There's so many people laid off, so they're just excited to have a job and to be busy. But did you see, because you own technology, did you see adoption increase this year out of necessity?
Yeah, so I think two things that have changed the industry forever is digital technology and the digital connection. Everybody learned how to digitally connect using different types of tools. But I saw a lot of top producers excel at two things, digital connection and teamwork. I had never interviewed a loan officer that, top producer, averaged 30, 40 loans a month, but he did 100 loans in 1 month. And he did that through teamwork. He did that through digital connection. And some of the things that he learned through this period is how to build trust with someone, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's on phone, using technology. He learned how to do what would take him 30 minutes in 10 minutes. And that's not going to go away.
Yeah.
Like that skill doesn't go away. He's able to do that. So I think, there's just an efficiency that's been gained in the mortgage industry for those that have embraced it on how to use teamwork, how to use technology. That's just not going to go away. The industry can do a lot more volume. And I still don't think we've capped it out. I think we just figured it out this year. And next year, we're really going to crush it. Now, volume will probably go down just because, rates were not sustainable.
Right.
Well, this isn't the first time that our industry's done $3 trillion in originations though either. We've been, close to that in years past. I think we lost a lot of people after, 08 and that whole situation. And so it'd be interesting to see, I don't know the numbers, but staffing wise and just number of people in the mortgage industry, how efficient we are compared to the last time we did close to $3 trillion in origination.
I think we're a lot less folks in the business now.
I think so
active.
too. One of the things that you mentioned was newer people to the industry. And, I get concerned. It's kind of like when you see loan officers who got in the mortgage industry during the time of like stated income loans and they never learned how to qualify a borrower.
Yeah.
I kind of worry about newer loan officers that are getting in this season that don't know how to prospect for business, right? Because
good point.
there's so much business just coming in and we're hiring people to kind of handle just maybe it's even our own database business we just can't get to. So we're hiring juniors and people like that to take this business, and who's training them to be hunter gatherers, when this market shifts. And that's one thing that'll be interesting to see if we see attrition then of those people or if they learn how to adapt, and who steps in to train those people if they're not being trained by the people who actually brought them into the industry.
That goes back to how we started with false sense of accomplishment. You're right. Like being an originator and being a realtor is what I would argue the most important part is going out and originating, like finding business.
Right.
And if you have this false sense of accomplishment, I can do $10 million in a month because my phone rings, bro, like you're missing the whole front part of your business there. Like that is the talent.
Right.
If you don't have that talent, no offense to anybody, but you're probably going to become like a call center loan officer, and there's a great living there and a great business. But, highly effective loan officers and realtors have that insane ability to go sell and make friends. And you're right. Like that, again, that kind of brings back why I thought about this all year. Like anybody that thinks that they can go do the same amount of business and not have that attribute, good luck, man. I don't know if that's going to happen.
I definitely think what you said applies to some loan officers. Like they're pounding their chest. I'm a $50 million producer now. No, you were a $50 million producer in 2020. So I think that call out is solid. And I definitely think as an industry, we need to stay humble and we need to stay hungry.
Yeah.
And there will be a shift in the market. The question isn't if, it's when and how violent is it. And we've all been around enough to know that when the market shifts, it can be brutal. It's just a question, do we have that kind of a brutal change? And does it happen in 2021? Does it happen in 2022? When does it happen and how difficult is it?
That concerns me with, I think you're 100% right with the humility part of that, because we probably all know producers that are kind of banging their chest with their huge year this year. And unfortunately, their personal spending habits have increased, and that concerns me. It's not my first rodeo either. Same with you guys. Like it's going to change next year and the year after that. When I got in the business, my mentor told me budget, and this was 15 plus years ago, and I still do it, but budget for your worst year ever. Now that's way conservative, but I can think back of like some of my lowest years, and if I can budget for there, then everything else is going to be gravy. But how do you guys? I'm sure you've seen that, whether it's your company, we all know several people in other companies that false sense of bravado. How do you handle that? How do you coach that out of them for their own benefit? Because you don't want them again strutting into 2021 thinking, the Conor McGregor move that everything's going to be the same, and then they're spending at an insane rate, and then money's not coming in anymore.
Yeah, for me, it's probably twofold. One, share personal stories, right? This industry has a way of humbling you very quickly. And if you were an owner or an exec in 2007 and 2008, and you saw the chaos that ensued and the damage that happened, the personal net worth and company net worths that were lost, it's for me, it's a little bit easier to go back and tell some of these stories that this is what can happen. Maybe it doesn't happen to you personally, but these markets can turn. Just like take the early part of COVID, like we didn't know if the industry was going to exist the way that it was.
Oh my goodness, yeah, I
mean,
remember all those challenges.
I mean, and so you literally inside the scope of 6 months went from we don't know if we're going to exist, we don't know if the industry will have cash, we don't know if the servicing is going to break, to record year.
That's a great point.
So you don't really have to go that far back to tap into a little bit of that humility and fear that these things are very fluid and they can change in a moment's notice. And I think the other exercise that's probably a little more practical, because I think the industry is a little more stable from a credit standpoint than it was in those times. So that sometimes that won't really stick in their mind. But just do this little exercise where if you were to take out all the all the refinance business, and there's always going to be some, but if you took that out and you looked at your volume number and you said, okay, what does your commission check look like now?
Yeah.
If the refinance wasn't there, if rates were normalized and you had to really depend upon an inverse of that 30-70 split or 70-30 split. So now predominantly it's all purchase business. What does that look like? And if that was 2021 for you, are you okay with that? And if it's not, what are you doing now to lay the foundation to get there?
Yep. I love the going through Amplify with Renee and learning the importance of telling your story. I love that approach because we all lived through, what year was that? It seems like a million years. 07, 06.
There was a couple of years in there that...
Yeah,
07, 08.
we're rough. And
2009 and 10 weren't awesome either.
No.
It felt a lot better.
It seemed like 2010
Yeah, exactly, right?
was kind of like
Started getting better.
to build
Started
from
getting
there.
better.
But it's tough to be humble and say, I struggled with this thing, or, this year, especially you guys are probably all high Ds, I might guess, like they're hard drivers. And so it's not innately our ability to just flex into a vulnerable place to be like, let me tell you about a tough time in my life. I'm trying to learn to do that better, thanks to Renee. But I love that approach with just saying, hey man, I've been there. I've made the same mistakes. Like you're identifying with them. I went and did this. So it's genuinely just making sure that they don't make the same mistakes that some of us did.
Well, they're going to. I mean, that's part of it too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
For us to really teach someone the lessons that we learned, it is because we went through it. And I'm sure someone told me to save more and this too will change and you will have a year that you actually go down in income. And I'm like, no, that'll never happen. And then it does. And then you learn from that. And so I think that it's incumbent on us to share our stories with people, especially as leaders. And we've seen it. I mean, they look up to you as a manager, as someone who runs a team. People are looking to you for advice. So I think we should give that. But the reality is I do think people are going to have to learn it on their own. I also worry about operations people, to be honest with you, because we've seen a real shift, at least the way that we compensate people, to more and more of a per file type of a structure. We're seeing we did like some tier bonuses and stuff during these really busy seasons because we're trying to inspire people to do more work than they've ever done before. And so now we have operations people, not just processors, but also underwriters and people that are LOAs on teams that I know make splits. These people are making some really, really good money. And unlike the salespeople, they're not used to kind of the ebb and flow of the industry. So I actually worry about some of our operations people more, who just aren't used to the cyclical nature of their income going up and down. And I hope that they're also getting some of that training and mentoring from their managers as well, because when it slows down, you're not going to be able to incentivize people the way that we have to get through the understaffing. And I think most of us are at a place now, even with the current production levels are still very high. I mean, I think I'll have my second biggest month still in this month. But we're staffed up now, right? And so we're not as desperate to find super creative ways of compensating people for putting in the crazy hours. So it's going to affect a lot of people if there's a change and if they're not ready for it.
That's such a good point, and I want to get your thoughts on that too. But before we do, like if you're an executive, if you're a branch manager, if you're a loan officer, and you just heard that, like first go back and listen, and then go back and talk to your ops people, because I've been thinking the same thing. And LOs, and like we have definitely have those scars. We joke that we have some deep scars, and that's why we save money, and because we've learned that lesson. Ops people haven't been down that road before, and you're right, it concerns me as well, and we need to coach them through that. We need to prepare them through that. I mean, the underwriter bonuses this year were insane. The hours worked were insane by every LOA and processor, and so they worked so hard, but also the checks went up. Guys, Tony's 100% right. You need to coach your teams through that, because it's not going to always be there. And salespeople typically know that. They've worked in commission jobs. Probably my first job was commission. Maybe your guys' was. So I know that. I've learned that from day one. Ops people don't live in that world. So that's going to be a tough lesson for them. So go back and listen to what Tony said and then go coach your teams through that. Thoughts, Savage, on that?
I think you just need to build a culture of humble, hungry people. And this is just a great time to push on those values. You're right. You got to tell stories. And then I also think there's a lot of process. I interview a lot of top producers and how they set goals, how they stay humble. I just think it's a combination of investing in values, investing in leadership. And I do think like this has been the technology revolution. And I don't think we're over that, but I mean, the mortgage industry has really embraced digital technology. And I think going forward, we need to have this leadership revolution in the mortgage industry. And when I look at the top 10% who are killing it in the industry, they've adopted technology and they're really good leaders. I just think that is where the big opportunity is for the next, I don't know, throughout the decade. It's going to be leadership and execution that wins. I think everybody's got tech now, at different levels. By the end of 2021, I think the top 10% producers and companies have really invested in a great tech stack.
Good leadership was such a high premium this year. Go back to the days of what Patrick was talking about. I think it seems like 10 years ago, but I think it was February, March, April, when we didn't know what was coming. I mean, guys, we got on a call every week there because it was so hectic. You had
a few scary days,
executives and CEOs once a week, if not more, getting on a call going, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are you navigating? And that having good, steady leadership through that was so important. And that was so challenging for me. I keep saying, wow, man, last year taught me so much. And it was the hardest year ever, especially going through an M&A. That was personally very challenging for me. But then I walked into 2020 and it punched me in the face again, man. That was, again, I'm so thankful for the lessons that I learned this year. I know that I'll retain them and take them in next year. But Savage, you bring up a good point about good, strong leadership. And I don't know if you guys remember those days because it seems so long ago, but it was stressful. Yes, we're wrapping up the year and it was a good year, but you're 100% right. And I think we forgot because it was such a long year that it was so challenging.
Well, think how quickly we forget. Like, think of how much we adopted.
Yeah, that was this year. It was
Think
this
of
year
how
that
much
happened.
We overcame and changed this year. And then think those weeks when there were all the cash calls and everything. I mean, I forgot that happened. So it'll be interesting to see how much we adopt next year and how much we forget.
Let's try to do that.
Having rapid flashbacks of 2000.
Let's try to do that. Let's see if we can remember because it seemed like in a span of like a couple weeks and a month, so much happened. So what was the first one? Because we had margin calls. Was that first two? God, man, that's
probably the first 2 weeks of March, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Because that's when the big lock period happened.
Lock challenges. I'm trying to remember how this all went because
stimulus talk came in.
Stimulus talk. Feds came in.
CARES Act, and then
CARES Act,
which was the pressure on.
Everybody's worried about forbearance. And then we had the servicing challenge. Good Lord, see, we forgot about this. It's not that long ago.
Are you essential? Are you not essential? How are appraisals going to be handled? How is escrow going to be handled? Remote online notary. I mean, this is a lot of stuff that we talked about before we got in some sort of a rhythm over summer, right?
Yep. Good Lord, man.
And then by summer, it was like machine.
Yeah.
Just crushing.
Yeah, it kind of started falling into place. So let's pivot. And we talked about my biggest takeaway, which was I think you guys shared it all. Like we increased efficiencies. What are your biggest takeaways personally, professionally from 2020? And I want both personally and professionally because I know that there's some really good ones that I would like to share. But we'll start with you, Tony. Biggest takeaways from this year.
Well, I've always had a saying that I try to live, which is embrace change. And I don't think there's ever been a year where embrace change doesn't apply like it did in 2020. And I think that's the big thing. Just, no one knew that this was coming. And when I say this, I mean COVID. No one knew with this in our industry how it would be impacted with low interest rates. Our kids not going to school anymore, in our particular case, my wife stopped working to be able to homeschool. I mean, just changes everywhere that we didn't foresee coming. The way we go to the grocery store, the way that we, the way that we shop now. I mean, now it's everything has changed. And so for me, that was the big thing, just embrace change. And that's my big takeaway from 2020. I mean, I'm sure as we discuss it here, we can get into specific topics, but that's the overarching theme for me is nothing's like it was last year. From my personal life to my business life to, this the world around
Right.
us, politics even, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so that's my takeaway.
Being adaptive, that was big for me personally. Like this year I've been trying to get in better shape and stuff, and then the gym was taken away and I just wasn't going to fail. And so now I'm still working outside. It was 31 degrees this morning and I got up and I worked out because I had to adapt, to your point, to still reach my goals, personally, not professionally. And that's a huge one that we'll all take away. We all, again, were forced to adapt. That was a big one for me.
Well, the world was forced to adopt. Has anybody else, do you track your steps?
Oh, yeah.
Dude, how many, are you negative or positive from last year?
I don't know, because we really started tracking it more when I got my son the new watch, and so now he's really into it. So every night, my whole family, we check our steps before we put him to bed.
That's pretty cool. It shows you from last year to this year.
Oh, yeah. And it was not good. I was actually downed, So
Well, I'm sure.
one of my
everybody's at home.
takeaways is I need to walk more, do more walking meetings.
Well, for me, the steps equates directly to how much I'm on the phone, because I pace when I'm on the
Right.
phone. So I can tell when I've had a big day of phone calls and stuff, I'll be up. I mean, I've had days where I'm at 30,000 steps because I'm on the phone all day.
Yeah.
30,000 steps?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
legit.
It's
I want
crazy.
proof.
It's a lot of
Hey,
calls.
I'll show you. It's a lot of
phone
calls.
calls.
18 hours of calls, actually, that day.
I think the industry proved once again to be very resilient, and I think that resiliency and preparation are two themes that have been playing in my mind. Patrick Lencioni wrote that book, Politics, Silos, and Turf Wars. I don't know if you guys have read it or not, but essentially the beginning of that book is talking about crisis. So if you walked into an emergency room and see how doctors and nurses and everybody is glued into one person, right? And everything is working flawlessly because everybody's in crisis mode. Nobody questions, nobody stops, there's no arguments. And I felt like our industry this year was like that. In the beginning of the year when we had this bad crisis into abundance, into almost too abundance, like strained capacity, overworking, right? It's very resilient, and it's weird how flawless it can work when we're in a little bit of a bout of crisis. And so that for me is just proof again, like you had to move home, you had to be on video, you didn't see people in person, relationships from all your referral partners to team meetings, to pipeline meetings, to every single intricate thing about how our business was done was altered in a very short time, all the way to where we are right now. And so I think the other thing that most of us have probably learned is if you did lead, whether it was a company or a team or even just have production in 07 and 08, you learned how to handle and how to manage crisis. And so for me, it was still very scary. There was still a lot of stress. There were still a lot of people that you're responsible for. But you know that I have to get my sleep. I have to get my workouts in. I have to feed my body right. I have to do all these things that I didn't do in 2007, 2008. And so having something to recall from an experience standpoint, I think proved to usher a lot of companies through this with a lot less damage than maybe they would have taken on.
Yeah.
No doubt. When I heard you talk about all the cover and move, you have to do this, teamwork, and that you referenced a good book. I haven't read that one. I've got to read it. But I reread Extreme Ownership from Jocko Willink, and I found myself needing more Jocko podcasts this year.
Seriously.
Just Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
I mean, there was times where good. I feel like I'm a naturally positive person, but it required a lot more energy sometimes between the political turmoil and the COVID, and now we're getting locked down again.
I mean, dude, you travel for a living, so.
Well, I used to.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
But I mean, and then you had to do a virtual. What was it called this year?
Virtual. Yeah, we did a virtual summit.
Yeah,
the Modern
which was
Mortgage
amazing.
Summit, which was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think of you and our friend Ken Perry and Renee. Like everybody, all you guys travel for a living, and still had pretty good years adapting.
It was really a blessing for me. I was traveling more than I wanted to, and it was my son's senior year, so I got to, be at home, got to really enjoy. He really didn't have a senior year, he was at home. And fortunately, I don't know how the parents who had to just immediately go to virtual educating grade school kids, younger kids.
So tough.
That would have been a whole new piece of adversity that the Savages did not need to deal with. But it was great, and it's amazing how many more meetings I'm able to get, how many more people I'm able to present to. When I would travel, it would either be to meet with a C-suite, to grow a mortgage coach, or bring on a new client, or speak to large groups. But I don't know the exact numbers, but I would be willing to bet that I spoke to 3 times more people this year through virtual events, through using technology than I usually speak to.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 times more. I mean, it was.
insane.
Do you think now that's forever the future, Dave? I mean, if they look at CEOs and the C-suite and you say, maybe we don't need to fly as much. Maybe we don't need to have hotel rooms as much. Maybe they look and see that cost that's been cut out. They see the productivity up. They see the number of, calls, connections, communications. Is that now the way that we operate?
Well, Bill Gates in a recent article that I read said that 50% of business travel gone.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's what Bill thinks. There's no doubt there's going to be a different level of thought as to when do we need to travel, to grow, to sell, and it's going to be a lot less. Is it 50%? Is it 30%? I don't know, but it's a significant change. I know personally, I will never travel the same way for the same reasons and how I make decisions as a leader.
Do you think ops will continue to work from home, and not just for your companies, but in general?
Oh yeah, our ops worked from home before this for the most part, so that was actually one area that wasn't a disruption for us really at all. I think with our corporate office, it was, there was 900 or 1,000 people in that building, I think. And so to move all those people home was a whole set of challenges that they went through very well. But as far as our region, our processors, our underwriters, pretty much all of them worked from home beforehand, and we always saw the increased productivity from that. So
the P&L is an obvious yes. This is tough for me because it's like less brick and mortar, more efficiency. Duh, like end of conversation. But then there's the personal aspect that I worry about, the team, the stickiness.
Well, I am finding that loan officers don't all want to work from home. And I think there's something to be said for, look, if your business is outside sales and you're doing prospecting, you're meeting with, whether it be different referral partners, realtors, or financial planners or whatever, as a regional manager, I kind of want my loan officer to wake up in the morning, get dressed, take a shower, head to the office. Right. And then from there, it's like a launching pad to go out and do your sales activity. And I think for salespeople in particular, something does get lost, at least in my opinion, by being able to just roll out of bed, walk down the hallway, and get on your laptop and kind of stay in your little cave. Yeah. It's great for operations people. I think it's more effective, more efficient for them, especially with their kids not being at school. I mean, huge advantages there. But for salespeople, I'm finding that they're kind of over it. I think that they want to, maybe the office looks different than it used to. Maybe it's more of a collaborative type of a space. We've seen some of our offices go to that, but a place to go, dock your computer, check in, get the inspiration, bounce ideas off people with difficult files you might be working on, or different difficult relationships you might be, whatever you're experiencing out in the field. I think salespeople need that more, and so I don't foresee that going away, although it might evolve.
Well, here's a thought, because I agree that like a salesperson wants to get out, wants to connect, wants to touch, but I think consumer trends have just changed.
Sure.
And nothing tells the story better than healthcare. So I recently interviewed Steve Brown. He's got a book called The Innovation Ultimatum. And I didn't know this stat, but it blew my mind. I just heard it a week ago, that in 2019, there were 50,000 health calls. People getting doctor's advice virtually. Guess how many there's been already this year?
Millions, I'm guessing.
Over 1 billion.
Oh my gosh.
Over 1 billion. So 50,000 health calls where you were getting, and think of, there's nothing like I'm going to see a doctor for my health, and it's virtual now. And so that changes consumer trends. And then you think of how many people now do business with Amazon and like it. I like to order things and just have it delivered to my house. Social changed. Grandma likes Zoom. So
Grandma likes Zoom.
Grandma likes Zoom. So, but you just think about all these different social changes that it's going to have a very profound change in the way that we sell.
Right.
And while as a person, I'm always going to want to get, like, that was part of when you said, hey, Dave, these guys are coming up. I'm like, I want to come up and hang out with some people in person. I want to, knuckle my friends.
Even on the buying side, though, we did a show, and I'll forget the stat, but this year, more than ever, I think it was like 41% of homes in Seattle were bought via just like a Redfin or something digital, and never, like sight unseen, like not even seeing the home. Consumer trends. And I think that's a lasting
The consumer trend has changed.
Yep. They didn't even see the house. I mean, I just bought a rental, and I made an offer before I saw the house.
Well, these new 360 house tours are
Ridiculous.
amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really cool.
Well, the Google Earth for me is helpful too because I can see where it's at. Is there a school nearby? Is it in a bad neighborhood? So I'm
go
trying
around
to
the
buy
neighborhood,
more
check it
rentals
out.
this year, which is one of my personal takeaways. I've got a deep scar. You and I have talked about a lot of like save your money, be well capitalized, wait for a rainy day. Okay, now I've done that. Like it's a win, but I can't just continue to sit on my money. I need to invest. I need to go to work. So I'm trying to buy more rentals. So I'm looking constantly at these rentals. I've made several offers, never walked through them, never seen them, to your point, because I can see 360 and I can see the neighborhood. And the realtor's like, do you want to go see them? No. Like, why do I, what do I need to go see? I've already seen it. So that's going to be.
The numbers make sense.
I think it's going to only continue moving
Real
forward.
estate investing will be strong.
71% of homes, this stat I will remember because I read it today. 71% of homes in Seattle sold under 2 weeks.
Wow.
During COVID. So you know that they didn't tour the house.
No.
71%. That was the number one most aggressive market. Portland was like number 4.
Yeah.
For you guys.
Yeah.
Consumer trends have changed. It'll be interesting to see what 2021.
Do you have any
has to hold.
personal ones? I feel like I'm the only one opening up here, guys. Like,
No, I
not
think again it goes
personally.
back to having kids, right? I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old daughter, and so when you have to navigate the challenges of what it's like to miss prom or to miss full track season or to miss
We're
getting
dealing
your
with that
driver's
too.
license because the DMV, it's so many things that we went through as young people that are somewhat rites of passage, and now they're delayed or disturbed or taken away. You're trying to kind of retool fundamentally how you navigate that stuff, and there's a lot of emotion. Like I think the other things that maybe I didn't think about as much, but kids really need routines. And that the school and sports and friends and their social network, that's all one large routine. And when that's taken away, you have a lot of challenges at home. So, you're facing challenges at work. You're facing challenges of, am I going to get sick? Am I not? What does it mean if I get sick during times of COVID? And then, we had this other scenario in Oregon where we had these crazy wildfires.
Yeah.
Right in
about
the
those.
third largest county of Portland. And now every single home that was under contract or being refinanced had to have an additional inspection plus pictures before you could close. So again, it just goes back to, okay, how do you manage all these things? I think that for most of us, we understand how critical coaching is. And my coach was instrumental in helping me kind of navigate that stuff from a balance perspective. And personally, for me, when life is balanced, things can go really well. When I get out of balance, things can go really poorly.
I'm concerned. I don't know how you're doing. I'm really curious because I don't know how to handle this with my son. He's a senior. His whole senior year is being robbed from him. And you may not remember your freshman or junior or sophomore year, but we all remember our senior year. And my boy's a senior, and he's not having any of those experiences. You just lived this with Jack. I mean,
It was.
I don't know how to, like, how do we give them back the homecoming, game and dance and stuff, the prom, all those experiences. How are you guys dealing with that? Because I'm just hopeful
Rose-colored
things
lenses.
change.
Yeah, you gotta just embrace it. Like we made a big thing of his high school graduation drive-through, and we will remember it. And shout out to Lake Ridge. They did an incredible job of making it amazing, making it special, making it memorable. His senior year as a lacrosse player, his team all came to his house and created a very memorable experience.
Cool.
So that is something I don't align with. I think we can create amazing, memorable experiences offline and online. I would tell you, we had a company, every Friday we have an all company meeting. And usually it's all about briefing on the business, different departments brief on what their goals are. This last Friday, we just did freestyle. What are we grateful for? And we went around the room and everybody shared what they're grateful for. And one thing that they're going to work on for the new year is the best business meeting I've ever been part of. And I honestly think if it would have been in person, people wouldn't have been as vulnerable. But because they were in their house and they had their voice and they were even more vulnerable, and we had an amazing virtual connection. Now, I'm not saying virtual connection is better than in person. I'm just saying it's different.
It can work.
It can work, and we can create amazing experiences.
Well, and maybe some of that was part of you going through that, experience with Renee and being vulnerable. So you got a leadership improvement for a high level dude that's been doing this forever, still improving, in 2020. Because it seems like
Thank you, Renee Rodriguez.
Yeah. It seems
How
like a million
fortunate to
years
go
ago.
through Amplify in January before all this.
Like 2 seconds before COVID hits. Essentially.
Like we couldn't have been luckier with that.
And I would tell you, it's interesting because I've been through Renee's live experience a couple times, and I've been through his virtual experience once. And it's like they're two different disciplines. And I do believe that there is this virtual connection, virtual leadership, virtual presentations that as leaders we all need to master.
Well, I think it's great. I know all of us use video a lot more than maybe the average person. I've been using WebEx and video meetings for a decade or so. And, it's easy with my managers. I can just force everyone to turn their cameras on. But, people don't like having their cameras on. But now that everyone's gotten comfortable with Zoom, I got to be honest with you, I think it's awesome. Again, does it replace an in-person meeting? No, but it is different. And there's people that I would never go meet with in person, especially with remote employees that are now willing to get on a video call, turn their cameras on, and have a kind of interaction with them that we just didn't have before because now they're comfortable with it. Yeah. So I'm really happy that the video aspect in video conferencing has evolved the way that it has, and
it's making us more productive.
Yeah. And how about Microsoft Teams? You mentioned Teams. I remember you mentioned Teams like back in March. You're like, I'm using Teams. I'm like, Teams is horrible, but but Microsoft stepped up their game super quick. I mean, Teams got really good really quick. I was pretty impressed because they were getting slaughtered there.
I'm going to use the app on my phone now.
Yeah.
Now, people won't even call me on my cell phone within our Teams. They'll call me directly through Teams, use the phone feature. They'll call me video through Teams, or they'll send chat through Teams. So it's like, and with everything linking back to the Microsoft suite from a work perspective,
right.
and I'll have more face-to-face meetings, particularly with operations people, than I would if we were in the same office with them. Because it's, you maybe don't walk down, or maybe it's a scheduled meeting on Monday at 9 o'clock in the conference room, but I will literally have an ops person just hit video, click to me, 2-minute conversation, and then off, and we're talking face to face. It's awesome. I think it's a hugely powerful tool. And I don't want to go back to the kids thing, but I do want to touch on this notion of maybe traditions and legacy. As leaders, we're all getting to the age, and we've been in the industry long enough now, where we were talking about our ops people. Do our ops people want to work from home? We talked about savings. Do we teach? We talk about this with the salespeople, but do we take the time to sit down with our ops people and say, do you know about your 401k? Do you know how to fully fund it? Do you know how to take care of the match? Do you know how to get liquid reserves? Do you know how to live debt free? And very few of us have that conversation, but long after we're gone, we can have all these mortgage accolades and you're a good operator, great operator, but that's not what they're going to remember.
Right.
They're going to remember, this was a leader who actually helped me save, helped me get to retirement, helped me have reserves for the downtimes, helped me prepare to up my game so that my job would be there when everybody else was being laid off. And I think you can take that to your kids too. You're right, Dave. Sometimes we have to smile during these times and say, you know what, honey, I can't give you the prom back, but here's what I can do. You can have 5 of your closest friends, and we'll build a movie theater in the backyard. And every Friday night, your friends can come over, and now we've got a new tradition. Yeah. So as leaders, it's our job not just to say, well, that's really bad, sorry about that, and kind of put a smile on it, but it's like, how do we reinvent ourselves, which I think is going to be a main topic of how do we do this business in 2021 and beyond, if we're kind of in this place where we don't meet people belly to belly, face to face anymore.
As much.
And I don't think they want to now, because I think they have loved getting used to video. Mm-hmm. So our industry is notorious for not wanting to create new traditions, not wanting to adopt new technologies. The mortgage industry has always lagged behind to a certain degree.
Not anymore, though. Not anymore. No, we're leading fintech. I mean,
like, you chance to embrace it, though. Don't you agree?
Oh, I totally think so.
Well, it's also our opportunity to decide what it looks like, because in the absence of us deciding what that looks like, the fintech companies are going to decide what the interaction with the client looks like, unless, I think it's an opportunity for your, more traditional loan officers who don't want to get gobbled up by the pure fintech, companies, to decide what does a great customer interaction look like while utilizing the tools of today. Because like I said, if we don't, then pretty soon everyone will want to just, push button, get mortgage. Right. So how do we reinvent that whole process while making sure that we're leveraging, what the consumer wants?
Well, I don't know when I first used this term, but you need to be a fintech powered loan officer or mortgage professional. You need to be a fintech powered lender. And I think the lender and the loan officer needs to be creative. And how do you do that in a relational way?
Right.
I recently interviewed Dan Keller and Jeremy Forcier on business planning. And we talked a lot about being relational versus transactional. And that's come up. I interviewed Hunter recently, Hunter Markowart, and talked about that. And I think it's how do you be a fintech-powered lender delivering an incredibly relationship-oriented experience. And I think the mortgage industry is leading all industries. I mean, personally, I study what's happening in insurance. I study what's happening with financial advisors, what's happening with CPAs, and I think the mortgage industry is killing it.
I want to ask you about that that call with Forcier and Keller, and we'll transition to 2021 here in a second. But when you were talking about just the challenges in adapting with their family, it was really tough for me this year it was so challenging at work, and everybody had their own sets of problems and drama, and like it just drained you. And we were working long hours and so many different problems coming at you. When I got home, there's a saying that I always try to remember, like, give your best to your best. And that's professionally, but also your best is your family, right? And for a while there, I had to snap out of it. I wasn't giving my best to my family because it was at work. It was a 12, 13, 14-hour grind emotionally, too, because people were like, oh, my God, I'm going to lose my business. Or, they're having their own sets of challenges with their kids not going to school. And I still have to underwrite loans. And how am I going to teach my daughter? All of that. And so I came home, and I'm just being real and honest. My wife was like, hey, I don't, my life's been taken away, too. My son, my daughter, they needed me just as much as at work. And so that was really tough for me. And thankfully, hopefully I did a good enough job, snapping out of it. But it was really tough because the year was so tough at work. I hope that I was able to pull out of that for my family. And I'm sure if you're listening, you guys probably had a similar struggle,
We're all in the same boat, I think.
Yeah.
There's no playbook for what we went through. And so then you're just like, I got to do the best I can. And that has to be good enough for today.
Yeah. But yeah, my wife, I remember her kind of looking at me like, yes, your life professionally is crazy, but my life is also crazy and I'm having to adapt. So I think things will continue to be that way. So learn from my mistake and make sure that you're giving your best to your best.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a lot of spouses that could share in that experience. And it's come up with a lot of interview with top producers at balancing, but I don't think this was a year of balance.
No.
Anybody's like,
Not at all.
I balanced my business and my lifestyle. I mean, no. This was not a year of balance.
So speaking of 2021, all the lessons we just talked about for 2020 and getting ready for 2021, we'd be remiss to not leverage everything we learned this year and then get ready for next year, because I think it's going to be another challenging year for other various reasons. I missed, and I'm going to go watch your interview with Forcier and Keller, but can you distill down kind of the takeaways from that? Because you talked a lot about planning for 2021.
Well, I think what made that such a special call is that not only did they distill in a very comprehensive way, the tactics of business planning, the concept of SWOT analysis, not a new idea, but they broke it down in an hour, and then it was layered with their personal stories. I mean, my biggest takeaway is just how intentional these two leaders in our industry have been for over a decade. So, I mean, nothing that they did happened in a year. It was the accumulation of, 10 years of planning, really the past 5 years. If there was one personal big takeaway I got, was just the power of documenting a 3 to 5 year vision. Jeremy closed the call by reading, a vision that he had for his life in 5 years. And again, what made it such a special conversation is just breaking down the tactics and the processes of planning, which the best do. And I do think that's going to be the superpower of 2021, because I think so many players either have great technology or they are implementing technology. So the technology advantage is less of advantage. It's going to be the leadership advantage. Who's doing the planning?
All right.
Who's doing the leadership? But that 5 year vision was my biggest takeaway from the conversation.
So this year we went to kind of the opposite of that, and I need to get better with the longer term vision. But because again, necessity, we focused on the 12-week year. You guys have heard me talk a lot about. Yeah. So it was actually very appropriate because things were changing so quickly. It was actually easier this year to focus on 12 weeks versus the whole year, because after 12 weeks, you might be in a completely different industry, or
Well,
you know what I mean?
In fairness to what Jeremy said in that interview, was that he's revised his 5-year plan 3 times in the last, couple of years, right? So it is a moving target, because the reality is when you're that clear on what you want to accomplish, you're going to accomplish it. And so you're going to accomplish it faster than 5 years, more than likely.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have to change that target. So a 5-year plan maybe does become a 12-week plan or whatever, right? Because of the way that goal setting works. But that was an amazing interview. One of the big takeaways I got from Jeremy, and it was actually, he said it last year too, which was he wanted to do one more deal than he did the year before. I'm sure he obviously smashed that goal in 2020.
Right.
But that's a good takeaway. I mean, that's part of what I'm looking at. As I did my business plan for this year, and I used a little bit different style. I used Building Champions model for because I'm coached with Bill Hart. But the theme was, how do I maintain the production we saw in 2020? And like I said, we talked about all the market influences that helped us accomplish that. But what can we do where we, knowing that the market's probably going to change? It might, rates are going to stay low, obviously, but it you can only refinance everyone so many times. And so what can we do to just maintain the production that we did this year with maybe not as much of a tailwind helping us? What can we put in place? Where can we work harder, if you will, as opposed to being so reactionary this year and getting through it? Where can we be intentional? And what can we put in place to just keep our business the same in 2021? Because I think if we can do that, that's a huge win. I mean, I've always been a growth guy. Like, I want to see the next year be better than the next year.
Right.
But one way to kind of keep the momentum going is recognize that this was an amazing year that had outside forces that helped us get there. And if we can duplicate that in a more normalized market, that's a win. And that's another thing that I took away from
And
Jeremy.
sustainable, back to one of your original points about being unsustainable. That's a sustainable
Right,
model.
make it sustainable,
Right.
exactly.
Well, and he said that for the past 10 years, he's only had a 10% improvement over the course of 10 years. So it just makes a great case, especially for new loan officers, be the turtle. The turtle will beat the hare.
Well, he also said, this is something I think people, is that he said there was 3 times in the last 5 years, or 3 times in the last 10 years, I think, that, he said he doubled his business 3 different times, but he's only had 3 different years where he didn't go up the year before, and it was after he doubled. So,
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. I mean,
Yeah.
it's possible that maybe it's a down year,
Right.
But I think that if we focus on what would it take, because to me, it's all about modeling it out. Everything can be modeled out. I mean, especially, if you're a branch manager that runs a P&L, or like I run a P&L, you kind of know what the math needs to be to make it all add up, right? So you can just kind of draw that out and say, okay, well, now what would I have to do every day to produce those results? And it's not rocket science. It's just actually really basic science. Yeah. It's just simple
Planning
simple
and leadership.
math, really.
Planning and leadership.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
You're up, buddy.
A couple of things as it relates to business planning. Number one, the reason the 4CA vision thing comes off is because any of us who've been writing vision for a long time understand that that's the destination. And the business planning piece is much different than the vision piece. It's how do I get there, right? That's the roadmap to say, if this is what I want my life to look like, if this is what I want my team to look like, if this is what I want for my kids 3, 5, 10, 20 years from now, what are the steps or the disciplines that I have to do to get there? And I'm willing to do them. And are they realistic? And so as people start to wrestle with vision, the reason we recreate them is because importance of things or importance of matters change for us over time. Right. For me, the older I get, experiences become more important. I want to travel. I want to experience things. When I was younger, maybe competing was more important, right? Racing my bicycle or playing golf or building a company or building teams. And so the level of importance of what's placed in some of those visions changes over time. As our kids grow up and they move on to college and they become their own adults, then our vision starts to change once again. And I mean, Daniel Harkavy told me something a long, long time ago, and he says it over and over again. It's self-leadership precedes team leadership, right? And so if we want our teams to have vision, if we want our kids to have vision, if we want to march to these things and build sound business plans, we have to do it and act upon it first. And so I think if you lead that over time, it's very compelling, because if you can see what you want to be in the future, eventually you can build it, which is where people get excited about the business planning process or a new year or revamping some of those visions.
Yeah, I love that you just brought up, Daniel, his new book, and he makes just a great case that leadership is just all about the decisions that you make and the influence that you have. I mean, clearly, when I came into 2021, I came in with a goal to improve my influence. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I went to Renee's Amplify, was just I'm on a lot of stages, I create a lot of content. How can I do it in a way that has more influence? And I do think you're seeing mortgage professionals just be some of the best leaders. And I don't like that word influencer. Like, we were not trying to be influencers, but to be great leaders that have influence over our teams. So I love what you said.
Yeah, it's. I think that's also an experience level, right? I mean, and we're teaching the next generation of leaders. So I keep going back to this notion of this concept of legacy, but it's essentially, you're right, the decisions. What are we leaving behind? How are we teaching them to lead? And how we influence people is largely by the decisions that they watch us make. And if we're making good decisions and they see that they're to benefit the team or the company and not just ourselves a lot of times. I mean, the very essence of leadership for me is servanthood. Like, it's not being the boss. Leadership is, how do I serve you? How do I help you crush your barriers, so to speak? Like, if you have something in your way, how do I help you remove it? How do I help you believe that you can go to the next level? Something that Jeremy is great at is seeing that picture in his mind's eye about, I want to get there and I know I can. I may have to remove some obstacles, and what are the steps for that? And I think truly that's what leadership is for us, is helping people sometimes believe or see things in themselves that maybe they couldn't see before, just by simply opening a door.
Speaking of crush your berries, leadership in video, because you brought it up just a minute ago, that was one your videos when you're like just got done riding your bike, which you're wearing something that I would never be able to fit into. What's it called? Like a leotard? Speedos.
It's actually called a kit.
So kudos to you for being able to pull that off. But man, I really love those videos. It's just you on top. It seems like on top of a mountain that you just rode up, and I really enjoyed how you leveraged video this year. I think you started it this year. So if you're out there and you heard Tony talking about video, it doesn't need to be like this. It can be. I actually really enjoyed today. You guys are very, very smart people. I learn from you every time we hang out. But it can be doing something, and I would encourage you to do something you love. For Patrick, it's riding bike, and your mind tends to clear up. And I feel like that's kind of you just being you, sharing your wisdom from doing this forever. And so video doesn't always have to be like the Resource or a podcast like Rogan. It can be something just like that. And I think it's a great example.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of those things are just things that come like right out of your heart, right? I find like sometimes the best video content that I produce is just literally something that spilled out of my gut. It didn't, I mean, it wasn't thought of or scripted or anything. It was just like I got to the top of that hill and I had this thought, and there was a lot of stress going on in the world, and I'm just like, talking about the ride down is what I was referring to. Is that all the hard work is on the ride up, and the heavy breathing and the sweating and the heart rate. But when you get to the top, there's a reward. And for a lot of our originators, the reason they're celebrating is because you're right. The video thing is critical. Like, I'll give you an example. Aaron Coker in my office in Lake Oswego, you know Aaron very well. He was using video with Mortgage Coach. He was using Zoom and video to do all of his client consultations. So when this happened, he didn't switch anything in his business other than how he ran his pipeline meeting by video, because he was already meeting his clients, meeting his referral partners. Every TCA had a video. And so what really happened is that everybody else who saw that and didn't think they could do it, they were forced to adopt it. And then it became more natural over time. But the video thing, I when we talk about 2021, I really want to touch on that, because I think that is the way of how we're going to do business in the future.
Oh, there's no doubt. And you have killed it, brother. I mean, the video leadership you're doing, Tony, you too. What I see both of you guys doing on social media, it's the good of social media. Seeing people that have just a good, authentic take on things, creating very authentic content. I love it. I mean, I've pretty much replaced all of my news with people that I just trust and respect, and the content they create. And I'm listening to more Joe Rogan, more Jocko, more industry leaders like you guys, and just a lot less corporate news and media.
Dude, you've created and sustained a mega brand leveraging video. I mean, if that's not a case for leveraging video,
Right.
I mean, a mega brand, a national mega brand, leveraging video, and the content's insane. There's all year I've been saying there's so many. Like, Tony's videos are great. Dave's are like, I just have this backlog of positive content.
Right,
I love what you said.
There is a lot of content out there.
Replace the negative news with all this positive content, because it's really hard to get to it all just with all the work that we have. And that's a great idea. I've already stopped watching the news because there's nothing positive there. But I'll replace it with the positive podcast.
Right.
Sure, thinking about the coaching communities and mortgage coach communities, and you think about all the good that comes out of it, right? It's not like people are, Jeremy's asking all those people to pay them or you to pay them for the content. That content just comes out, and people use that content to alter the course of their lives. They alter the course of their business. They alter how they do business, all for the good. And so I think as much of this content as we can produce and get out, if it helps somebody, great. And if it doesn't, and they leave it by the wayside, that's fine too. But the reality is, I've talked to hundreds of people, Dave, in the industry that have been influenced and impacted by all of what's going on. Your show, the mortgage coach community, building champions community, the core coaching philosophy in their community, and their video as well. It's like you're only going to get better if you surround yourself with great people, talented people, smart people,
And be thoughtful about what you put in your head.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, that's never been more important than right now, is just being thoughtful about what you're putting in your head.
I mean, let's wrap with some positive thoughts of moving into 2021 for your teams and for the rest of the industry, the executives listening, the realtors, LOs. And for me, because it's been so challenging this year, that's kind of like that comes to mind throughout this podcast is just the positivity of always staying positive with your kids and adapting throughout a very challenging year. And just, guys, I mean, if I can encourage you, like Dave just said, turn off the negativity, get into a community, just like Patrick was talking about, a positive community that's going to challenge you, that's going to uplift you. All this negativity is just pulling us apart. And there's so many beautiful things, even during COVID, that are out there. There was a lot of growth this year. We all grew. I think, and you guys are all like industry studs and legends, and you guys grew. So even the top of the house grew. So that's because of holding good company, challenging yourself, throwing you in the deep end, and staying positive. So I'll let you guys kind of wrap with your own final thoughts, Dave.
Well, I guess I'll start. So I think 2021 for me is the year of controlling my attention. I was pretty moved by the movie Social Dilemma, or no?
Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah, Social Dilemma. Nothing I didn't know, but it really made me think personally about how I consume, how I create, and I think as professionals, as leaders, as loan officers, we need to manage our attention and become a master of that like never before. And then I think as salespeople, let's face it, loan officers are salespeople. You need to manage the attention of a client. You need to deliver this amazing digital virtual experience that's incredibly relationship oriented. I do think, video is a necessary component of that. I think, when you think of how the best loan officers in America are connecting with a client, they're just crushing the competition. They have a great conversation with someone. Maybe it was on Zoom. They had a great link. It was easy to take an app. They're putting a text video on giving some advice. They're giving a link for mortgage coach. I mean, they're just the experience between the average loan officer and the experience between the team LO that is this fintech powered loan officer. I mean, it is like...
That's a great divide this year.
It is the great divide.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so I would just push anyone listening to this, whether you're a loan officer or whether you're an executive who's leading loan officers, it's the year to help the people that we serve manage their attention. We need to help them save money. We need to start helping, how are we managing our attention as a team? And are we consuming the right content? Are we creating the right content that aligns with our values and goals? So I think, again, I'll just close out with leadership, training, but with those two focuses.
So smart.
I did a video a while back. I used a surfing analogy about riding the wave, but then having to, get back in the water and paddle back out to catch another wave. And I think as we round out 2020 and head into 2021, look, we still have the headwind. We are still riding the wave right now. And so the opportunity is not past anybody to do what Dave just said, which is if you haven't already started embracing all the things that we're talking about, the video, using the technology, being very intentional about your conversations, really thinking about how are you going to go forward and connect with the people who have the ability to refer you purchase business, whatever that looks like. What is your strategy for that? We still have a tailwind. We still are riding the wave. Rates are going to be low for a while. The wind is at our back, but now is the time to really be intentional about how you're going to, maintain this and be comfortable with the fact that, this may come to an end. We don't know how it happens or when it happens. But there's going to come a point where, things seem like it's kind of over and you're going to have to jump back in the water and you're going to paddle out, but you're going to catch another wave, and good surfers can almost catch a wave in any seas. Yeah. And so that's what's important to recognize. I think the other thing is that, the market doesn't dictate our success. We've had a lot of wins from the market, but there's people that are successful in every single market. And for me, it's always helpful to recognize that it's great when the market helps me, but I don't need the market to be successful. And we have to keep that in our head as we move forward and things might start to shift on us, is that it's more about what we do every day that's going to drive our success than what the market does to kind of help us, if you will. So
the only thing I would say, it's not the market's not might shift; it is going
right.
to shift.
Well, I'm trying not to be a downer here.
But I think it's important. I mean, everybody recognizes it's gonna shift, guys, and the shift it's gonna be real. And it may not be in 2021, it may be in 22, but the shift is coming. And if you don't get the habits of the best, the difference between the best and the rest, it's never been better.
The last thing I want to say is, we talked a lot about the content you've created, and I'm impressed when Dave said he was going to do this content literally, I think, every day a couple of years ago, and it's never stopped. Every Tuesday morning, every Friday morning, but he puts it all on YouTube. So it's hard to find stuff on social media sometimes for me, but the nice thing about all Dave's content is it's on YouTube, it's categorized, there's playlists. If you're a new loan officer or an expert loan officer, it's all there. So if you're looking for content to fill your time besides watching the news, and you're a loan officer and you haven't already gone to Dave's, YouTube playlist, that's the place to just start there and then, venture off. But it's remarkable, the amount of content. And here's the last thing I'd say is, look, I'm in the mortgage business now for, I think, on my 24th year. Many people would say reach good success, but I'm tuning into content every single week. And so it doesn't stop, And so for those people who are newer in the business or trying to grow their business and they're not taking in the content, I guarantee you every one of us here,
we're all taking in
the content every day, So that's what it takes,
The best of the best train daily.
That's right.
Like that is also a difference. They train daily.
That's
and
right.
Some of it's consuming, some of it's skill-based work. It's putting that all into play.
So mastery is one of our core values. My team, mastery. It's like there is no limit to what you will learn in this industry. We went to the beginning of this industry, and if we put, maybe 10 of us that were in that coaching group together, with that whole collective brain power, we still didn't have all the answers. We still didn't even know a fraction of what could or could not have happened with all of those things that went down, especially in the first 3 months, right? Yep. So if that's the case, that there's always something new to learn. There's always some boundary to push. There's always some new tech to adopt. There's always some process to put in place. I use a kind of a simple, 3-word process for my team. It's preparation, consistency, process. You're right. This business isn't rocket science. It is very, very difficult to figure out how to deliver a killer, unique experience for a client. But if you learn that, if you're prepared, if you're consistent, and if you have a process for lead generation, a process for origination, a process for fulfillment, just do it over and over and over and try to do it with some level of high proficiency or mastery, you're going to be successful in any market. The housing market is going to continue to be very strong. There's no supply. Even if rates move, I think 2021 is going to be a phenomenal year. But you're right, we may have to switch or direct our attention to the right areas, because answering the phone is not going to be something that is going to be an option for people throughout the course of 2021.
Love it, guys. Your time is all valuable, super valuable, and you gave it to the resource communities. So for that, thank you guys so much. You drove here. It took a couple hours. This was amazing, and I'm just looking forward to the second one, so maybe we can do it in Portland next to you guys.
Perfect.
Tony
Yeah,
and I
let's-
can
let's
drive
do
down.
that.
That's even farther for Tony.
Yeah, exactly.
Portland worthy coffee.
Maybe things are opened up and we can do it in
I'm
an
down there all
actual
the time.
restaurant or bar or something next time. But again, thank you so much. You guys are so smart. I learned so much from you. I'm sure the audience did as well, and we'll have you guys on next time.
It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, guys. See ya.